So for the last 20 years, Brigham Taylor has been working at the happiest place on earth, the Disney Company. As a creative executive, he's been involved in several movies, including Remember the Titans, The Rookie, Tron, Chronicles of Narnia, Oz the Great and Powerful, and Pirates of the Caribbean. As a humanities major, he received permission to have a film emphasis, a rare combination at that time. He gained experience by working on student films, and after graduation took on every entry-level job that he could find. Seeking more permanent employment with his family, he took a leap of faith and moved to California. I don't know why California requires a leap of faith, but he was hired by Disney as an assistant to an executive, and thinking Disney would be a springboard to other opportunities, it ended up providing him with the challenges and experiences that he needed to advance in the ranks, eventually to his current position of Executive Vice President of Creative Development and Production. Taylor's most gratifying work has been on Pirates of the Caribbean, where he was on the ground floor as the lead creative executive and seeing a film deliver beyond its expectations. New projects in the works are Tomorrowland with George Clooney, I think, and a live-action adaptation of Jungle Book. A typical date night with his wife, Michelle, is a dinner and, of course, a movie. And they have 4 children. Please welcome Brigham Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome, John, and it's great to be with you guys. Many of you I know, like as I said, my family, friends. Not daunting at all. Quick disclaimer, I don't like public speaking. I'm not good with public speaking, but I will attempt to lower the bar for you right now in terms of your expectations. But I have some thoughts, I have some notes, and I'll try to get through this, and with luck we'll go through some thoughts. Maybe some of them are relevant, and then we'll save some time for question and answers. I see that my daughter has a question brimming already. But it's really wonderful to be back here. I graduated in '92. I started here in '85 as a lost and wayward freshman. I didn't know what my major was. I kicked around in my uncle's class in design and other things. But I had no friends. I had nowhere to go. I had my sister Amy and her husband Jeff were here, and they would feed me. And my sister-in-law was here. They'd clothe me. They took care of me until I actually made a few friends and figured myself out a little bit. But it's wonderful to be back here. My last job in Provo, I graduated in '92. We spent the next 2 years here. My wife was teaching school, elementary school nearby, and I was taking odd jobs. And the last odd job I had before we left Provo was working at a company called Turf Plus, where you got to drive your own truck, and you had a big, tank on the back of your truck, and you would go to different homes and spray their lawns, so they little weed and feed, kill the weeds, let the grass grow. And it was actually kind of a fun job. I enjoyed it. But it wasn't a career, but it was my last job here. And the next time I came back for any kind of job to Provo was about 15 years later, and I came back to speak to the film department. And so I came, and I was happy to come. It was fun to speak to the group. And I brought a few clips for movies I was working on at the time. And then an old film professor of mine raised his hand, and I thought he was going to ask a question, and it was really just a comment. He says, "So in a way, you're still spreading fertilizer." And I thought about that and I said, yeah, they're not all great. Some of the movies are good, but they're not all great. But I was cut down to size quickly, but I had to think about that for a while. We'll come back to that. His name was Dean Duncan, by the way. You guys know Dean. Does not spare an opportunity to dive in. But it's really wonderful to be back now here at the Humanities College, which obviously was my major. And humanities, I didn't know coming into school what my major was going to be. I drifted around a little bit. And I finally came to the point where I made this decision based on some good advice that I'll talk about in a second. But humanities is what gave me my foundation for everything that I think that I've been able to do in my professional life. And you're talking here about, my introduction to art history, to literature, to critical thinking, everything that I use in some way or another kind of every day in what I do in trying to work on these film projects. And so it's been such a tremendous benefit to me for the last 20 years. That I can't express my gratitude enough to this department. And so, like I said, before I declared this major, I was drifting around. I didn't know what I was going to do in school. And as a result, I think my interest waned. I mean, it's good to be here because I barely made it, actually, at a certain point. I didn't know if I was going to survive to the end at BYU because I was, I think, so unfocused, didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a roommate who gave me great advice at a point in time. And he pulled me aside, and he, I think, objectively knew me a little bit better than I knew myself at the time. And he says, this is what I think you should do, because I think you need to go declare a humanities major. You're really going to dig it. Go to the dean at the time. I think it was Britch, we determined. See if they will offer you, didn't know what's happening behind me, the opportunity to emphasize in film, which they didn't offer at the time. But I said, well, you know, why don't I go have the conversation? He said, that sounds interesting. I went to Sharon Swenson, the dean of the film school. She said, that sounds interesting. And so I was able to emphasize in film, which was another passion of mine. And I don't know why my friend gave me that advice, but it was great because I think that I had a balance in my studies I wouldn't have had I just declared a film major. But I took his advice. And the other thing he told me to do, which I also followed up on, he says, you should go to Sundance is right around the corner. You should be volunteering up at the film festival, which I did. And I started 3 years as a ticket taker, and I saw as many interesting projects as I could. And it really expanded my mind to the possibilities that might exist in a film career. And so, but all along, I think the reason that combination of things really worked for me is that, to me, they all funnel back to the idea of storytelling, which I realized is something I wanted to be involved in. And the study of history and culture and artwork, they're all formats of storytelling. And of course, film to me is the modern format of storytelling that we all gravitate to. And I think that's why I loved it so much. So after school, I was not interested in grad school. I felt like just surviving here was enough. It was quite an accomplishment. Pat myself on the back. I took some odd jobs. I took any work in film production I could find here locally, of which there was some. There's an IMAX film here. There's a church film there. There was educational film. There was feature films for families. Some of you are old enough to remember those titles that went straight to video. But then my long-suffering wife Michelle was teaching school, but we decided to start our family, and we had our first daughter. And she said, I think it's time for you to get a real job. And I said, yeah, that's probably right. And that's when we decided to move to California and take this kind of leap. And so we did that, and Michelle took our young daughter, and she went up to stay with her parents while I went down to sleep on my sister's couch in Rancho Cucamonga in hopes of finding a job. And as was already mentioned, all my headlines were stolen by John in that intro. But 3 months, it was not easy, but 3 months of pursuing and looking and failing and finding something. I finally got one interview at Disney, and that wound up giving me my job, which was an assistant, basically a secretary to a young executive that was there at the studio. But it was, sorry, I told you I'm not a great public speaker, but it was a great job at the time because it offered me, some stability. It offered me the ability to bring my family back down. We got an apartment. We were able to actually sort of feel like we were going somewhere. And I felt like at least this was in the realm of the kind of job I wanted, but it wasn't the plan to stay. Because in my mind, I wanted to be a part of the storytelling, meaning either the writing and the directing and the producing of a film. And I was in this administrative position. And so it wasn't the plan to stay, but over time, opportunities came around to get more involved in that storytelling aspect. And I learned about 5 years in, when I got the opportunity to be an executive within the Disney group, that you were a part of that storytelling. And all of a sudden, the light went on and said, well, this can be a career. And so I never left. It's been about 20 years. But it was that connection to realizing that you could impact the storytelling process. Yeah, I skipped over some funny stories there, but I think we'll probably run out of time if I try to tell you everything about the time when I almost became a UPS driver. But just trust me, it was a very humorous anecdote. And so what do I do? I think that as an executive, this is my mother still asks me what I do, and in all my vain attempts to explain it, she still asks me. It's hard because I don't, my name isn't in the credits of a film. As an executive, I work with a lot of people that work for the studio, that surround a film, that help make it, that help develop it, that help produce it, and our credit is really, that Disney logo that appears in front. But so what I really do day to day is, as a job, is I help to find material. That means you go out, either you're looking at a book, or you're hearing a verbal pitch from a writer or a producer, or you're getting sent a script. Any other way that you might find an idea. You may be looking to your own library at Disney. You have all these wonderful, this history films. you can draw upon. Obviously, even the theme parks become sources for IP, but you find material. And then once you think you found an idea, you set about the work of developing that material. And so that's much like an editor might function in the book world, where you work alongside a writer and you help to shape that material. And they go off, they write something, write an outline or write a draft, they hand that in, and you sit down and you talk about it, you and your team, the producer, the writer, maybe another associate of yours. And you talk about what you think works, what you think doesn't work, and it's just the subjective process of trying to tell a better story or try to communicate the story that we all thought we agreed upon. And so that's the development process. And then you finally get to, hopefully, a script that you like. And then you are in a position to hand it upstairs and say, we think this is good, maybe this is a movie we start to make. And then you go through the process, if they say yes, of starting to prep that film. We already talked about the fact that upcoming for us, you know, we, in the near future, this Tomorrowland is a film we're in the middle of shooting now, which is, I would just describe it as an action-adventure with some sci-fi elements. It's a very hard movie to pitch. I'm not going to try to tell you. On top of that, it's very secretive, so I can't tell you anyway. But we're shooting that coming out next Christmas. We have another Pirates film, believe it or not, that's kind of getting close, that we hope to be shooting next year. And then this very fun challenge, we're developing a live-action take on Jungle Book, because we're in a place now where we think the technology to bring about the characters that you know from that world that Kipling created have actually reached a point where you can do it, where you can actually create kind of a photoreal representation of there's Baloo, there's Bagheera, there's Shere Khan with a live-action Mowgli. And by the way, there's a wonderful version in the animated film that Walt produced in 1967, but we think there's an interesting, dramatic, grounded version that really draws more upon Kipling. So those are just some of the things that I'm excited about coming up. But to stay inside the process just for a minute, because I can tell I haven't bored you enough with that, is just to give you an example. We have the next movie that I've involved with that's coming out is a movie called $1 Million Arm, which is a smaller film. It's based on a true story. It's more in the vein of films we've made in the past, like The Rookie or Remember the Titans or Miracle, such as that. But the process was this. So in my job, I get a call from producers and say, hey, we have this great idea. The fact of the matter is they'd already set up this idea. They'd already sold it in their studio. It was at Sony, which is Columbia Studios. And Sony had dropped the ball, and they had lost their interest, and things had gone wrong. And so it was back up on the auction block, so to speak. And they called us and they said, I heard the idea. We'll talk more about the idea. I'll show you a sizzle piece. But we liked the idea, and so we brought it in. We then collectively went out and found a writer. And we found this guy, Tom McCarthy, who was a talented guy. He had done films, including this little wrestling film called Win Win, which was, he's a character actor turned writer, but he's a very, very talented writer, and we felt very lucky to get him and have his interest in that project. And so he went off and wrote a draft. And we struggled with that draft and saying, is this in the right place? We went through that development process, and we finally got someone to say yes. So let's take a look right now. If you can, Mel, find that clip that is the sizzle piece that just gives you a little bit of flavor for what this movie is, and we can talk a little bit about it. This will be an adventure. So that's what we call a sizzle piece. It's obviously not a trailer. It's kind of a tool we use inside the company to share what we're trying to do with other parts of the company or other potential partners for a movie. But that's also an encapsulation of sort of what an idealized version of the story we're telling ourselves as we're trying to develop it. And then you actually got to go make it. And this is a movie where, and one of the things I'd like to impress today, just for those of you who like to go to movies and wonder why there are not more good movies, is because there's a million ways for movies to go wrong. This process, every decision you make at every point in the stream, it's subjective. As we go here, we go there. We go here, we go there. And then you think you have the best version of that script, and then you go off. In the case of this film, you go to a place like India, and you start shooting it. And all of a sudden, it's literally 110 degrees in Lucknow, India, and assistant cameramen are fainting on the set. And so you get what you can, and you shoot. And you have actors many times who are generous and good to work with, but even they will have a point of view about, like, I'm not doing that, I'm doing this. And you have all kinds of interesting decisions and compromises to make. And then you bring all that footage back and you cut it together, and you see something that's essentially a completely rewritten version of what you thought you were going to get. Yes, it resembles what you thought you were going to go get, but a million decisions have been made in the meantime. And so is it still any good? So that's the next step for us in our jobs, is to, you take the director cuts the footage together and you look at an early cut. And so we're going to look at I'm going to draft you into the process here. We're going to look at a scene. It's about 3 minutes from this movie. This movie's not done. This movie doesn't come out till next May. But we look at this, and then we have to decide, like, is that working? Is that not working? We get it to a point. Then we even put it in front of other people and hear back from them. Is that working? Are you laughing? Are you not laughing? So brace yourself. This, you know, I don't know if this scene may offend some of the sensitive sensibilities of people like Anders. I don't know. But you look at it, and we'll talk about it, and I'm just putting you in my shoes, which is then we have to make some decisions. And you know, clearly sometimes they're the right ones and sometimes they're the wrong ones. Sometimes you made the wrong decision way back at the beginning, and you've signed off on an idea that no one's going to care about. No one may care about this true story about kids being pulled from India to LA, and you know, it has elements we love. You know, it talks about family, it talks about dreams, it talks about the optimism of being able to accomplish things you don't think are possible. But in this context, maybe nobody cares. We don't know. So let's look at this scene. So we look at this, you know, we put everything in there that we set out to shoot, and then we have to decide, is that working, is that not working? This is a section that's obviously supposed to illustrate that this character, who's kind of become an overnight father without ever intending to, by bringing these teenagers back under his roof, is learning that parenting isn't all that easy. And he's having to make the decisions and having to figure out what his priorities really are. And so we have to decide if that, you know, is that being undercut by the fact that we have a vomit joke, you know, that leads up to it, and that's kind of minutia you can get caught up in all the time. Like, is that distracting? Is that working? And you have to put it in front of people sometimes and ask them the same questions, you know. And then is the emotional sort of resonance there? Is that paying off? Is it actually setting up what the ultimate payoff of this story is supposed to be? You sit there and you get wrapped up in these conversations, and you ultimately have to make decisions with your director, obviously being the most important voice in that. You're trying to support his vision wherever you can, unless you just can't. And you say, well, that's got to go. And so that's where we find ourselves in every project. That's where we are in this project now. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we'll actually put it in front of an audience in Woodland Hills, and we'll ask them some of these questions. But it's all part of the process, but again, it comes back to storytelling. What are you trying to communicate? What do you want the impact to be? And then you try to make your decisions according to that. You get caught up in other sorts of crises that I go back in time and share. Probably the biggest crisis we faced at a studio was when we were making Pirates of the Caribbean. We had, at the time, were spending more money than we ever had on a film, on an original film. And so the pressure was there. We'd even hired this guy, Johnny Depp, who, if you think back to 2003, and many of you are young enough, I don't even know if you were around. And so, but he wasn't that big a star. He made a lot of movies, but he was not any kind of movie star. And so, but we wound up needing to pay him a lot of money because oftentimes that's what happens when you make big studio products. Actors expect to get paid rather than just go do it for the love when they're making, you know, some independent film. So we'd spend a lot of money. We're spending a lot of money on the whole movie, and we were feeling good. We'd gone through all the steps of the process I've outlined. We felt good about the script. We felt great about this casting. We had a bump in the road when we actually had what we call hair and makeup and wardrobe tests, where we're getting the first look at what these characters are going to be on screen. And all of a sudden, we're seeing for the first time this guy who is kind of scabby and ratty and has these weird braided, a little chin beard. And he had all kinds of gold teeth and looked like gap tooth. And he looked really kind of haggard and weird. And we're like, well, that's not like Errol Flynn. That's not what we were necessarily imagining. So there was a little bit of a speed bump there, and some conversations about, can we tone that down? And I think at the end of the day, maybe we got him to remove one gold tooth. But it was a real negotiation, because he's like, hey man, I like what I'm doing. He had a vision for this, and it didn't necessarily jive with what people had in their head. But then we cut to actually filming begins, and I was in a position to go. We're going to watch this scene. It's not the behind the scenes, but just a scene. Let's move forward to that. It was day one of shooting, and you don't shoot a movie in sequence, right? You shoot according to locations and where you have to be. And so day one happened to be a scene deep into the movie. We were on a sound stage in Glendale at Circle 7, Channel 7. I don't know why we were there, but we had a space. And I was watching, and what I saw seemed fine, and then I had to jump on a plane to go to another project. But when I came back, the dailies, which is the footage that you shot that gets developed and comes back to the studio, you watch the dailies, unedited, just raw stuff. Those came to the studio while I was flying back from Vancouver, and it was a full-blown panic. Let's look at the scene that is the day one, 2002. If we can get.
I expect to leave you standing on some beach with absolutely no name at all, watching me sail away on my ship, and then I'll shout the name back to you. Savvy? But that's the least problem with me standing on some beach with no offer's name, and your word is the one I need. fact, if you hadn't betrayed me and left me to die, I would have an equal share in that curse, same as you. Bloody hell, Will, really.
So that was day one. I still can't understand everything he says in that scene. It's kind of hard to keep up with it. But what I saw on the day didn't alarm me. When I came back, I had a junior executive call me and saying, like, I don't know what he's doing. I think he's channeling Dudley Moore. He's slurring his words. He's effeminate. It was all kinds of like concern. And I said, really? So I walked right back in. We put the footage up there. And I saw what he was saying. I wasn't sure within myself if I was panicked, but I was saying, I get what you're saying. He's obviously, under some influence doing this. But what I knew, that what my job was in the moment was I had to make sure that my boss, the president of production, and her boss, the chairman of the studio, needed to see what was happening on their $100-something million movie with their $10 million movie star, and to make sure they were comfortable. Because if they weren't, and then this came up, I don't know, a month down the line, that's not good for any of us, right? And so I went through those dailies and really just the angles on Johnny, and I picked strategically the one that I thought was the most intelligible take in the whole batch. Like, I know what he said there. That was a line. And I queued that up on a DVD, and I went to those offices, and my one boss was off in Rehoboth somewhere on vacation. I couldn't get to her, and then her boss was there, but he was busy. And it wasn't until 24 hours later that finally he walked into his conference room and pushed play on the DVD, and he watched the take, and he says, yeah, okay, that's fine. And the only comment was like, is that finger polish on his nails? I go, no, that's just dirt. He goes, okay, and he turned around and he walked out, and I kind of went, okay, well, that's okay. And then the fact of the matter is there was more conversation had later when my immediate boss saw the footage and had some concerns and some dialogue happened, but at the end of the day, nothing was really altered. Everyone came to the conclusion that this was a take on the role that was acceptable. It wasn't necessary that he be a romantic lead. He could sort of be a wild card and be whatever he wanted to be. And we made our peace with that. And you don't know that it's going to become a popular thing. It did, but these are the things you have to deal with. And sometimes even if you decide we don't like that, that doesn't mean you can necessarily even alter the fact that, because who's going to go into Johnny's trailer and force him to change his performance? It's hard. Everything is hard. So when movies turn out well, it's because a lot of things have lined up well. And when when a movie is not good, it's because at any point, sometimes you get derailed. And it's way easier to get derailed in this process. But that's enough about that. So again, as I've said, my favorite part, my connection to this business is the process of storytelling. And why I asked myself, and I tried to describe for myself, because I think it's, especially in filmmaking, you desire the communication you can have with an audience and the impact it can have on an audience. That you would get a desired effect, that would be, either to elicit a laugh, to cry, to get them to think, or to even to inspire them. And I think that's part of if you're doing it well at Disney, hopefully, that optimistic inspiration is in there somewhere, in the context of entertaining. But that's the real desire in storytelling, is to communicate something, to have that impact. And so I just thought of my favorite example, one of them at least, of where we succeeded, I thought, in doing that, in creating something, and that message, that piece of storytelling actually, going through this whole sausage grinder and getting out the other end and still kind of doing something. It was in 2004, we made this movie Miracle, and it was about the U.S. hockey team in 1980. And again, none of you were alive in 1980, but you may have heard of this story, which was it was one of the greatest sports stories in American history, in terms of the scale of the upset, the circumstance, in terms of, again, it was a time when the nation was in a bit of a crisis, and there were gas lines, and there was a Cold War and everything else. And this thing, just the whole country was able to rally around this event. And so we tried to recapture that. And then our screenwriter, Mike Rich, did this wonderful job. Herb Brooks, who was the coach, who had consulted with us during development, he tragically died just at the end of production. But he let our screenwriter in on what he said to his team before the final, not the final game, but the semifinal game with the Russians. And so let's play that scene. Let's cue that up and it'll take a second. But we did that. I want to show you the scene, and then just talk about a little bit the personal ramifications for me. Whenever you got it, Mel.
Great moments are born from great opportunity. And that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you've earned here tonight. One game. If we played them 10 times, they might win 9. But not this game. Not tonight. Tonight, we skate with them. Tonight, we stay with them. And we shut them down because we can. Tonight, we are the greatest hockey team in the world. You were born to be hockey players. Every one of you. And you were meant to be here tonight. This is your time. Their time is done. It's over. I'm sick and tired of hearing about what a great hockey team the Soviets have. Screw them. This is your time. Now go out there and take it.
So I'm surprised you weren't all standing up and like marching out onto the ice, because I was. But so this came out. We released this movie in 2004 in the winter, in February, I think. And the Athens Games are that summer. And stories started to ping back to us about the athletes taking this movie and screening it for themselves. And we had the really successful female gymnastics squad that talked about that. Michael Phelps talked about watching this and really getting like uplifted. And you couldn't dream of a better target audience in terms of what this story was meant to convey and to who. And then for me personally, I find myself flashing forward now to 2010. I'm from the Bay Area. We grew up as Giants fans in terms of baseball. I'm sorry if you don't like sports. I'm going to talk sports for a minute. You can check out. But so we're up there, and this team has not been to the World Series, or at least has not won a World Series since 1954. Never having won one since they've been in San Francisco. And so we are on a playoff run now in 2010. And we have somehow gotten through the first round, and now they're going up against the vaunted Philadelphia Phillies, who in preseason polls, or just in postseason polls, were the most dominant team in the field, and largely favored to win the World Series. And so, Phillies very much equated to the Soviets in terms of their prowess. And so here we are. I get tickets from my buddy at ESPN. We go. I have a couple of my brothers and my father, who, at this point, obviously, has been, suffering with the Giants for many, many years. And we're at this pivotal game because we're at home in San Francisco, and it's game 4. It's game 4 against Philadelphia. And if we win this game, we go up, we take a commanding 3-1 series lead, and feeling like we have a lock on getting to the World Series. If we lose this, we fall back to 2-2, going to Philadelphia with no momentum and little hope. So this game felt like everything to those of us in San Francisco. So we get there, and there's 2 untested pitchers. It's a seesaw battle. It's a close game. And we get into the top of the 9th, and where the Phillies come back and they tie it, I think, at 4-4. And everyone felt the momentum slipping again. If this game slips, it feels like everything gets out of reach. And we're sitting there on pins and needles, fearing the worst, as fans do. And someone up in the PA box decides that in this half inning, they're going to play this speech. And to the entirety of AT&T Park, to the 42 assembled, that speech plays. And everyone's listening, and everyone has the context, which is, we're the Americans, the Giants. The Phillies are the Soviets. 9 times out of 10, they're going to win, but not tonight. And everyone is freaking out because it's like this scene is speaking to them. The impact couldn't have been more phenomenal. Of course, it doesn't guarantee anything, but we cut to, this speech plays out. People are kind of going nuts. There's electricity in the air. And then the bottom of the 9th comes, and we get a runner on. We move the runner over. We get a runner to third base with less than 2 outs, is 1 out, and a deep fly ball brings that guy home on a sac fly. And he scores, and then let's just play this clip. We're there. I got a precious piece of video. It's on YouTube if you want to watch it later. I'm going to show you just a snippet of it. You know what I'm talking about, that little, yeah. But you have to feel it. You have to get a sense of what it was that night. If we can get it here. That was it. One more time, it's so short. That was my 80-year-old dad. We've never had a better night in a sports-related context in our lives, and you can't convince me otherwise that it wouldn't have happened without that scene. You know, we could debate it. You know, maybe it would have happened anyway. I don't think it would have happened without that scene. And to me, that is just one of the thrills about being in the storytelling business. And so I want to close really quickly and just tell you that, you know, it's like a lot goes wrong in movie making, and any kind of storytelling for that matter. Every now and then, you know, things can go right. And when they do, I think they can add something meaningful to the cultural history of storytelling, which puts you on a little bit of this continuum that goes all the way back to myths we learned, like right here in these classrooms. And that's really thrilling. And so for that, again, I say thank you to BYU and thank you for your time. I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
We have 2 minutes for questions, and then Brigham needs to meet with President Samuelson. So is there anyone that would like to ask a question, and we'd like to get that question?
I saw that hand first, right there. The real implication is that it better be good, because there's only 2 minutes.
I'm in a similar boat, I guess, as you were in school. I'm a humanities major, media arts emphasis.
Oh, good.
You know, this type of work is my dream. For someone who's now in this stage, trying to go towards that, what is your advice?
Well, I think you got a good start. I think this education is going to serve you very well. And I would literally just look for any opportunities you can in the form of internships. To me, that's one of the toughest things was I went to LA knowing one person in the world that had anything to do with that business. And he wound up being that connection to the first interview. And so all thanks to him in that regard. And so, but I didn't take advantage of any opportunity or seek out any opportunity that weren't just some smaller local opportunities to get out there in the field in some way and to meet people and to learn a little bit more about what it was that you thought you could do well in the context. Because there's dozens of different kinds of jobs there. And it's about matching it with what you think your skill set is and what your strengths are. But that kind of exposure is important. Yeah. I like your shirt, man.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I knew you were coming, so.
Oz, the great and powerful. No pandering here.
So part of your job title has the word creative in it, and what would you say to someone who wants to go into a creative field but may fear that they're not creative enough to make it?
Well, I think that if you get into the field, there's a long time, you're basically apprenticing in some way or another for a long time, during which time I think you can assess. And I think the only way to properly assess is to solicit feedback and to try to, as much as you can, to guarantee honest feedback and figure out what it is, where your strengths are. And so I think to pursue, if that's what you have in your heart to do, that's what you should be pursuing, and that's a strong indication. But along the way, there's people all around you, and you can get feedback all the time, but you have to get out of your comfort zone and you have to seek it. You can do it right here in school. You get that obviously from your instructors, from your professors, but also from your peers. And so I think that use that to help guide you. And sometimes it may not be right here, maybe just to the right or to the left. You know, if you think you're a writer, maybe you're not a writer, maybe you're an editor, you know, et cetera. So I think that feedback becomes really vital. Yes, sir.
I am interested in a lot of I want to work for Disney as a career, not essentially in the film business, but what do you feel why do you like working for Disney so much?
Well, it's easy. I mean, I have a strong connection to it. I grew up with it, and I loved animation specifically. In fact, there was a brief window of time where I thought maybe that was a career, but I wasn't very good, and I didn't wind up going to. You now have an animation department here, by the way, in this university, that's phenomenal. But so I always had an affinity for the company. But when it came right down to it, the one guy I knew, I would have taken any job. I was looking for a job in the filmmaking industry, and the guy I knew was at Disney. And that was kind of just kismet. It was just good fortune. And at that point when I started, I had already started our family, and it was really fun to work on stuff that you could kind of share in some way. And there was a culture there you could kind of share with your family. So it was good luck, but but it was also something that I felt like it was an opportunity I was ready to take advantage of because I had a strong affinity for that brand and for that company. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so.
Obviously not. But I tried. Thank you, John. So I think we're
One last question.
If one was to pursue the creative track in Disney, what kind of things is Disney looking for in somebody who's applying?
Again, when you're starting, the aspiration to be creative is fine. I mean, unless you've had very specific training, if you've gone through a program like an animation program and you have a portfolio where you're an artist, then you're looking for a very specific track. If you're someone like myself who has a broader interest in filmmaking or whatever, then it's really about getting an entry-level position and about excelling at that point and taking advantage of that opportunities. It's being in that place and taking advantage when the opportunities come to be able to contribute something creatively, to be able to contribute something. For me, it was I had a decent working knowledge of film history, current film. And so when I was in the administrative position and I was in a room full of creative people, I actually had an opinion that I was willing to share. And that's what led to the invitation to become part of the creative team. And so I think that oftentimes you can't expect to go 0 to 60 in your first job. It's about getting your foot in the door. Again, there's specific training that may impact this answer, but in general, it's about putting yourself in a position to be around that environment, to be around those kinds of people, and then to apprentice as strong as you can. Because obviously you have your day-to-day job, your duties, but then you go outside of that to ask questions, to learn what you can, and to be of use, even beyond your your initial sort of entry-level kinds of roles. So I think that becomes really important. You don't get it all overnight, though. You do have to earn those stripes, and you have to, by doing notes and by actually offering what you have to share, people will, again, they'll assess you, they'll give you feedback, and you'll see if that's working. And then if it's working, then you may get the opportunities. All right.
Thank you. I know that many of you would love to be able to put your hand on the shoulder that held the arm of Captain Jack Sparrow. But my instructions are to get Brigham to his next appointment. So if you would allow us to the exit the room, and then if sometime later this week you would like to come to my office and touch the hand that was on the shoulder that held the arm of Captain Jack Sparrow, I would be happy to provide that experience for you. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks to Brigham.
Thank you.